Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And now it's your turn to share your stories. Today I have Lori with me, and she's going to be sharing about losing her sister, Gina. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my journey with you today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Lori. So I definitely want to dive into you and Gina. Tell us a little bit about, let's go back in time. Tell us a little bit about you and Gina, your dynamic, family dynamics. Tell us a little bit about you and Gina.
Okay, so I am the quintessential middle child. Gina is or was my older sister, and we have a younger brother, Philip. And you could go back and ask them if she were here or him about how it worked in our family. And pretty much I could say the same thing to my mom that they said, but I would get in trouble for it. And I always like to say that Gina, oh, she's so beautiful and smart. And Phil is talented and the baby. And Lori, we love Lori. So it's funny, and it's always been a joke with the three of us growing up as kind of how it went with us. My sister, very passionate about everything, and she and I fought like cats and dogs growing up. We're 2 years apart. We had a lot of the same friend group once we got a little bit older, and then became extremely close until the time she died.
Isn't that interesting how we change when we get a little bit older, right? With a dynamic like that.
We still argued a lot as adults. We like to say it's because we're so passionate about everything we do, but she and I were extremely close.
Yeah. I know. I feel like we don't love our siblings if we don't fight with them. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, that shows our love. Like, we can pick on them, we can fight with them, but no one else better do it.
100% correct. Better not. Don't say one word bad about them.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're the quintessential middle child. I think that's
Totally
so funny. Yeah, and I totally get that. So take us to, so for those of you, again, who are tuning in, we lost Gina to breast cancer. And so take us to when this all happened, because it is a journey. As for those of you that have lost a sibling to an anticipatory loss, like breast cancer, like cancer, it's a journey. So take us to that. She was 37 when she was diagnosed. So take us to that time, Lori, and what was that like and what was going on for you guys?
So I'm a nurse, and my brother was actually getting married, and my sister Gina had remarried. She had two girls, and she had just had a baby, well, 10 months ago. So I was working 3 to 3 at the hospital, which I think is the worst shift ever. Mm-hmm. And so I would come home and I would pass out sleeping. And she woke me up one day, and I think it was like in July of 2007. And I'm sure I answered the phone not happy because I got woken up, and she said that she had found this lump in her armpit. And so I asked all the questions that someone in medicine would ask, like, does it hurt? Can you move it? Can you do all these things? And she could move it and it hurt. And so I was like, I have to go back to sleep. It's probably mastitis or something else, blah, blah, blah. And I got off the phone with her. And I talked to her a couple days later, and she said, I made an appointment to go see somebody because, and then she showed me what this lump looked like. And it was truly like a tennis ball in her armpit. So then I was really concerned. So she went to her OBGYN, who said, I don't know what this is. Maybe it's mastitis. And they put her on antibiotics. And then I think it was about 2 weeks later, I apologize, I'm not great with dates surrounding this. And it was a couple weeks later, and they sent us to see a surgeon who was like, ooh, I don't love this. Let's do a biopsy. So this was now in August of 2007. So they did the biopsy. My brother got married, and like three or 4 days after his wedding, we found out that she did have breast cancer. Then she turned 38 years old. Her birthday is August 29th. And we just started, it was just, first of all, like your entire world has just fallen apart. Like, how can this happen? Why did this happen? Just, we need some answers. So she had a biopsy and it came back that she was triple negative breast cancer, which 15, 16 years ago was way more difficult to treat. And it was a stage 3B.
Would you mind explaining what all of this means for
Sure.
those of us who are not familiar? That would be
Sure. I
great.
apologize.
It's okay.
Absolutely. So most breast cancers are driven by hormones. So they're hormone receptor positive. My sister's cancer was hormone receptor negative. So if you see when sometimes older women get cancer, they'll treat them with like tamoxifen orally or surgery, chemo, and then oral medications for years afterwards, because those type of cancers respond to hormone therapy. My sister's type of cancer did not respond to hormone therapy and it wouldn't respond. So based on the size of her tumor, they said that she needed to start chemo first before they would do the tumor removal. So she started having chemo. She truly was a champ. And I do have to say, my sister was so passionate about everything she did and loved her kids more than anything. So we would take turns who was taking her to doctor's appointments, who was taking her to chemo, who was getting this done. And she really was doing extremely well for several months. So they actually, at that point, didn't, she was supposed to have, I think, 16 rounds of chemo, and they stopped her at 12 because there was so much improvement in the size of her tumor that they were like, let's take a break, we'll stop the chemo, let's do a bilateral mastectomy and take it from there.
Was this still in 2007 when
This
this
is
was
still in
happening?
2007. They moved really quick. So
Yeah.
I think, I apologize. I know some people are so great with these dates, but you know what? Maybe it went into 2008. I apologize, but she
No,
ended up
that's okay.
having a bilateral mastectomy. Maybe it was early 2008. She had surgery, then she had radiation, and she really did, I think, have some really good months. But when we asked after she had her surgery, were you able to get clean margins? And clean margins means that they got the entire tumor and even the tissue surrounding it was clean from cancer. And the doctor looked at me like I was crazy. I think because they knew that I was a nurse. And he was like, why is she asking about clean margins? And he was like, well, it's already metastasized to her lymph nodes. So she's probably not going to have clean margins. And then they changed her diagnosis to stage 4.
Wow. If you've lost a sibling, trust me, I know exactly how you feel. I'm Maya. I'm the host of the Surviving Siblings podcast, but I'm also the founder of Surviving Siblings Support. I know that going through this experience is extremely difficult, whether you've lost a brother like me, a sister, or perhaps more than one sibling. Trust me, we know exactly how you feel. So that's why I started our Patreon account. You can click below to find out more about our Patreon. If you join our Patreon group, it'll give you just a little bit of extra support that you need along your journey as a bereaved sibling, or as we like to call it, a surviving sibling. We offer monthly support groups. We offer a free copy of our grief guide that is actually found on Amazon. It's called the Grief Guide for Surviving Siblings. We also offer direct messaging to our community and to me for extra support. And we have incredible events. We have workshops throughout the year that you'll get access to, and you'll also have access to our summit that happens annually. And so much more as you'll connect with a community of surviving siblings that understand the journey of losing a sibling. You can click below to join us today and also check out some additional VIP features that we offer. I hope to see you in the group, and until then, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.
It's very funny because as a nurse, I focus and I keep my brain science focused as well as data. And when you look at the data from 15 years ago, people with triple negative breast cancers, survival rate was not great at all. And then when we would deal with the oncologist and talk through some really specific like cancer genomes and patterns, it appears that my family, because my sister did have the BRCA genetic defect for this kind of cancer, they said that there's some tweak or some, I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, defect, excuse me. There's some defect that my sister and our family has that actually kills the women in our family. So before my sister, my dad's sister, my Aunt Linda, she was diagnosed at 35 and died at 37. However, when that happened, there was no genetic testing or anything to figure out what it was.
Right.
However, they were both treated at the same hospital. So we were able to look at some things. And my sister actually chose to be treated by the same oncologist that treated my aunt all of those years ago. So that is how it started and how we found out and the path that we were on in early 2008.
Wow. Yeah. So she has all of like she's going through so much, right? All of these things are happening and she can't, like you were saying, like you're speaking doctor language, right? Nurse language. And I think that's great that she had you as an advocate for her, honestly, because don't you think that that's helpful? Because I think for me, if I was in that situation, I probably would not know what to ask, right? Did you find that to be helpful? Did you find the doctors to be receptive to that? Or what was that like for you?
So I did. And I asked a lot of questions. And it's funny that you called me her advocate because I don't feel like I was actually her advocate till way later in her journey with this.
Mhm.
And I'll talk about that when we get there. I feel like I was always so very stressed. And then she would call me and I would answer the phone and I would be like, "What's going on?" And she would say, "Why do you sound so irritated?" And I'm like, "I'm not irritated. I'm just so afraid you're going to tell me something else bad." And so we actually bonded over that, where I was like, "Okay, I promise that I will not jump to conclusions that something bad has happened when you're calling me, as long as you don't only call me when things that are bad are happening." But I actually worked at the organization where she was treated at the hospital, and I think that allowed me a lot of leverage with having an opinion, being able to go to things that maybe other family members wouldn't be allowed to go to. And thank you for calling me an advocate early on in her treatment. I don't know that I felt like I was an advocate for her. So thank you for that. But it did, surgeons would let me come to this, or I would get to stay later at the hospital to stay with her while she was in the hospital. So I do think that there were a couple benefits to working there while she was being treated, and the benefit of having a medical background.
Yeah, of course. And yes, you were an advocate. I feel like we're really hard on ourselves and going through that. And I think it's really great that you and Gina had such a good way of communicating where you could level that out. Okay, just let me know, like when you're calling, it's not just for bad stuff. We're going to call consistently. I think that's really great and it's a testament to your relationship. But you were an advocate for her, and I'm excited to hear more about how that evolved for you, and because I relate to that for sure. But I think we always feel like we could have done more, right? We've always feel like we could do more, so we don't always see ourselves clearly, right, in those roles. But of course you were an advocate for her, and so I think I like to recognize those things. Tell us a little bit about, so we're in 2008, it spread to her lymph nodes. What does that look like next? Stage 4, and from what we know now, that's not a good sign, right?
It
Stage 4. So
it
what
was
happens next? Yeah.
so it was not a good sign. None of her doctors, none of them were like hopeless. They all said, "We have all of these different things that we can try, and we can do this, and we can go back and do that." And she went through a couple rounds of different treatment at the academic medical center where I worked. And then it just progressed. And then it was in her lungs. And then I truly feel like she did okay for a while. She truly did. I think it metastasized to her lungs in late 2008, but she was still getting treated. The hospital was still very positive and very hopeful. And I think that might be one of the points where I transitioned from trying to stop being a nurse to being her sister and seeing the emotional side of things and doing maybe some anticipatory grieving where I was bargaining, right? Like, you can take these four relatives of mine if you keep my sister. Or how about me? I'm not married. I don't have kids. She has three kids who really need a mom. Like, let me trade places with her. And so I think it was I tried to make this weird balance out of my logical brain and the emotional brain. And I stayed there for a long time where I was just so struggling with, please let me switch places with her. please take these 5 of my relatives. And I know that that sounds terrible to say out loud, but I can't be the only person who's thought that
I'm
as
so
part of
glad
my
you're bringing
journey.
this up. Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because this is something I get asked a lot about in just the different things we do, right? Events or workshops, things like that that I was chatting with you about before we jumped into your story. And it's interesting because I find that a lot of folks that go through the bargaining experience are going through an anticipatory loss like you. So I'm really glad we're talking about this, Lori, and you're sharing about this because this is not something that I experienced, right? Because it was done. It was done,
Right.
right? The what my type of loss and how like there was no, and I'm not saying that folks that go through a sudden or a different type of loss won't go through that. It just wasn't my highlight experience, right? I always tell people anger was a big one for me. But
Sure.
I'm so glad for obvious reasons, right? But I'm so glad you're sharing about this. And it's not weird at all that you went through that. And I think it's going to be so helpful for you guys to listen and hear about bargaining because you're describing it so well. Probably the best I've heard from someone because I think it's important to understand that that's not crazy. And you were justifying, like, I don't have kids. Like, take me and not her. Like this is true bargaining is what you're describing. And it's a very normal experience, especially for anticipatory losses. So I'm glad you're talking about this.
Well, thank you. It's funny because in my head sometimes I think, oh my God, if I told those family members that I was willing to trade them to keep her alive, probably not the best thing to do. But truly, I was deep into this anticipatory grieving and then trying to balance it out with the science because and logic because that's what I know. And it was a really, I spent a long time in the bargaining stages and not great, but that's where I did spend a lot of time.
Do you feel like you were in the bargaining stage up until she passed? I know I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but I'm just curious as we're talking about this. Or when do you think that changed a little bit for you in
So
that moment?
there's a particular story that I want to tell you where I actually think I changed from being the nurse slash sister to her true advocate.
Go for it. Yeah.
That happened later on. So just to take you there a little bit quicker, at one point, and this might have been early 2009, her cancer kept spreading. The University Medical Center said, "There's nothing more for us to do here. You don't have any more options." And so she decided to go with some alternative therapies, still in our state, just not super close to home. And so she was admitted to this hospital, and they started doing high dose vitamin C treatments for her. And now if we fast forward to October, November of 2009, she was at, I'm just not going to use the names of the places she was at for obvious
Mhm.
reasons. However, our family would all show up there, and there was a night that a majority of the our childhood friends came to see her. And we sat around and we talked and we laughed and went over just all of these great times that we had growing up. And when we were leaving, it was a hospital, but it was, I don't know. Hospitals are all white and lit up all the time.
Yes.
We were leaving at about midnight. And all I remember in this moment is that we were all walking out, and it was getting cool outside. And I remember the lobby being so dark, and the only real light was this gigantic fish tank. And one of our childhood friends, who I'm extremely close with, turned around and looked at me. And I don't know if it was the look on his face, but I just started sobbing, and he hugged me so, so tight. And in that moment, sorry, I'm going to get all teary. It was like I lost hope. And I knew that she wasn't going to live. And there was no more bargaining, or anything I did wasn't going to change that. And I think that was an absolute pinnacle moment for me in, like, I'm not the nurse anymore. I'm the sister, but like I need to be her true advocate. And within a couple of days, we were at the hospital, and I got there and they were giving her blood transfusions and just doing all of these things and this and that. And this part might be hard for me to get through. I had to have a conversation with her husband and say, "Who are you doing this for?" And this is truly Maya, where I became her advocate. I'm like, who are you doing this for? Because me standing here as her sister slash nurse slash now advocate, you're not doing this for her. And the more that we continue to waste medical resources, because it's now a waste, we're not going to survive her, or she's not going to survive this. So why are we putting a band-aid on a way bigger problem that we want to ignore? And that may be one of the worst days of my entire life. He was screaming at me, I'm sobbing, and then he finally was like, well, then do whatever you want. And I had to make my sister a do not resuscitate that day.
That's a big
um,
moment, Lori. That's a big moment. Yep.
and that may be the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. But in that moment, I knew that I transitioned from sister slash nurse to her absolute advocate. And for anyone watching, my sister will be dead 16 years in December. So still, things still get you when you go back to those moments.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because it's okay. It's okay that it's always going to be emotional, intense, bring
Right.
feelings up. It's a lot. Let me ask you this, Lori. I love the fish tank story, by the way. Love
Yeah,
that. So
it was like it was in a bad Lifetime movie.
yeah,
Like I remember thinking like, what is happening here? But yeah, it was like a Lifetime movie that nobody wants to be in.
yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that moment with us, because I think so many of you guys listening that have been through a loss like Lori's, that is anticipatory, there are moments that shift along your journey, and sharing that I think is going to be helpful. And we do have some incredible siblings that listen to this when they're going through what you're going through, right? They're actively losing their siblings. So knowing that these moments are normal, you're not crazy for all of those things, Lori, it's so helpful. And thank goodness for your friend that was there for you. These people are always so important in our lives. But I wanted to tap in a little bit to what you were sharing about your brother-in-law, because it's interesting. I hear a lot of conversations around this, because different people react very differently in these types of situations, right? When you've got your loved one who is actively dying and you want to do anything to save them, and making a decision like you made, you're like, we're not doing this for her anymore. We're doing this for us if we do this, right? Or you're doing this for you. That's such a difficult conversation to have. And so I just want to tap on this for a second. What advice would you give to a sibling that might have to have that conversation with a spouse or a significant other? Because that is so tough. Because I've heard in these situations from both sides, either the wife or the husband, or sometimes they're just, you've got kids together, I get it. I get why they're holding on, but you have to do what's right for your sister and or brother, whomever it is that you're losing. Like, how did you get the strength to have that conversation? Because that's her significant other. That's not easy at all.
I don't know. If
Yeah.
I'm being completely honest, I just knew that I had to do something in that moment. And I knew he was going to be mad, and I knew he was going to fight with me. But I also think that he was so angry and so mad at himself. Like they had a unique relationship. He took her on a date and then didn't call her for 2 years. And then
Oh my
he
gosh.
called her 2 years later and they got married. And he was always so mad at himself for wasting that time that they could have been together. And so I think he was going to do anything in his power to try to keep her alive for himself and for the children. And I absolutely respect that. And he's a good man. I just knew that if I didn't stand up for her, and I know I didn't talk a lot about this earlier on, but Gina defended me while I was growing up. I would get picked on at school. She'd be right on top of them. She was my protector. And this was my, not opportunity, but my responsibility to defend and protect her when she couldn't protect herself. So I think that if anyone is experiencing this, dig deep and do what is right for your sibling, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Because while that was the hardest day of my life, probably this far, it was potentially such a moment of growth for me, because the moment that I said that and he said, go ahead and do what you want, the rest of my family was like, okay, what are we doing? Like, what's our next move? then there was talk about taking her to like MD Anderson or other cancer hospitals. And I was like, how about we take her home and make her comfortable?
Yeah.
And she was still awake and alert. And this is another lifetime moment that I feel like I suppress a lot. But she asked us to buy birthday cards, 16th birthday, when I get a car, when I get married. And she wrote out all of these cards for all three of
For
her
her
girls,
kids.
which just tells you like the amazing visionary and mom that she was. Truly, I can't even tell you how many times while this was happening that I was like, my life has turned into the worst Lifetime movie that you will ever see.
Yeah, really well said, right? It's like a Lifetime movie. We're sitting there writing these cards and
Oh,
but that's wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, but it also just like reaffirms probably what you were thinking. She knew. She knew. She was like, "Okay, I know this is where things are going." And what you were saying about let's bring her home and make her comfortable, she knew. She knew. Was she actively talking to you about that at that point, or was it just like a known thing? Like this is probably the end
so
of the journey.
so yes and no. Sometimes she would talk about it, but mostly she would say things like, well, I'm going to do my best to hang around as long as I can. And in my brain, I would think, oh my gosh, like her fighting spirit isn't there anymore. And maybe she's accepted this, which then I think I was mad a little bit about that. The flip side is we deserve to die with dignity. And constantly getting treatments and poked and prodded, I don't think that's a ton of dignity. So we were able to bring her home. She didn't want to go to her house because of her kids. So she went to, or we all essentially went to her in-laws' house. They had a really great setup, and their entire basement was finished and really nice. And so we set up her camp down there. Everyone came in whenever they wanted to see her. It was really nice. I started spending nights with her. I had an incredible boss at the time who was like, I wasn't eligible for FMLA because she was my sister and that's not one of the qualifying family members.
We'll double in on that later in this episode because that's crazy, right? That's crazy. But
So
yes.
my boss said, I will make you my own FMLA. You do what you need to do. So I would, right, I would be with my sister at night. Someone would come in the morning. I would sleep for a couple hours. I would go to work. It was actually really helpful to me at that time. And so I would stay with her at night. And then like my brother would come or my dad or one of our other family members would come and hang with her during the day. And then I would come back at night. And I desperately wanted to be there when she passed away. I so wanted to be there. And we were giving her medicine so that she was comfortable and just trying to make her so comfortable. And sometimes she would talk to me at night. She would be up and talk. And then sometimes she wouldn't be and just in and out of it. She, and I missed this earlier on, but she had her 40th birthday in August. And then we're fast forwarding, like I had said, it's like November, it's late November, early December now. And it's really interesting because I wanted to have this gigantic 40th birthday party for her to just have a really big party and acknowledge her. And she absolutely didn't want it. She said, people will only show up because I'm dying, and that is the last thing that I want. And so we did not have a party. Well, we did. It was small. It was just our like immediate family, and she was happy with that. But she really was so mindful of some of those things. Like, I don't want people coming sitting and staring at me with that pathetic face. And I'm sure you're aware of that when people just look at you like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you."
Totally. I totally get
And
what she's saying. Yeah.
same. And so that's not at all what she wanted. So we didn't do that, which ended up being perfectly fine. And so there was a Christmas party that my work was hosting, and it was on December 11th. And I was like, I'm not going to go. And she was like, I want you to go. And I did not want to. I did not want to go, but I went. And I can't remember who stayed with her that night. I think her husband was there, and I know her father-in-law was there. And you go to this party that I don't want to be at. I'm not really present. I'm all over the place. I have all this stuff happening in my personal life, but I'm going to go. So I go to this party and doctors and nurses and everyone there. And one of my favorite doctors that I worked with at the time, he said, "How's she doing?" And I was like, "Not great. She wanted me to come to this party tonight." And he's like, "Well, once she passes, it will be for the best." And I've never wanted to punch somebody in the throat so bad in my whole life. And I'll talk more about that later because I
Okay.
think that there's a huge component of people not knowing what to say. So they
Yes.
just fill the space with ridiculous statements. But I went home from the party and I got in bed and I was supposed to work the next morning. And my brother in law called and said, "She's making this weird noise and kind of gurgly." And I was like, "I'll get in the car and come now." And he was like, "No, I don't think you need to come." And I was like, "Listen, let me just get dressed and I'll come out there." And I got up and I started getting dressed and ready to go. And he called me back and said she died.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember getting in the car and I had to call work because I wasn't going to make it to work. And another impactful place, I was getting on the expressway and the charge nurse answered the phone and I was like, "I'm calling in sick tomorrow. My sister died." And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Ooh, I just had to say that out loud for real." So that wasn't great. But then I got to the house, I got to see her. The rest of my family came, the hospice nurse came. And then the rest was that night is just a blur. Like we went home and slept and got up the next day to figure out what the heck we do next.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that she, like your brother-in-law let you know that she was making like a noise, and a lot of people have referred to that as like the death rattle. Is that like what it's supposed to be, like that kind of noise? And I've had other people mention that before. Is that what was happening and then she passed? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's usually the
Yeah.
death rattles when there's like a lot of fluid built up in the lungs and
Right.
whatever, and then you just their breathing gets weird and yes.
Right.
So yeah, it's so funny. There are so many things that I don't remember, but then there are these little moments that I can't forget and I remember like word for word what was said to me.
Yeah. I connect with that very deeply. It's grief, and I think it's so important that we talk about it because there's I connect with that. There's moments in my story where I can just like it's like a movie. I can watch it back and it's like and then there's moments where it's just like what day was that and what was happening, and it's so interesting. So what happened next for you guys, Lori? Did you guys have a service for her, or what was that like over the next few days? And I'm sure again it was like a blur, but take us through what you remember. I know
So
that was.
it was decided that we were only going to do a 1 day service. So it would be like a wake, then prayers at the end, and she was going to be cremated. First of all, to try to make it a little bit easier on her kids. She now has twins that are 14 and a 3-year old. So, and the 3-year old only knows her mom being sick.
Yeah.
So we had this 1 day thing. And this is another point where I was like, "Oh, she will be so happy that I did this for her. She might not be happy about a lot of other things that I've done, but she'll be so happy." We got to the funeral home and I went up to see her and she looked awful, like not even recognizable to who she was. And I remember going to my dad and saying, "I'm closing the casket. I don't care what like anybody says. This is not how she would want people to see her." And he was like, "Okay, I'll follow your lead." We had them close the casket. We found this beautiful picture of her, put it on top, and that made me feel a little bit at peace. Like,
Yeah.
I got you. You might not be here, but I got you. Like, I'm not going to let all these people look at you just similar to like her not wanting people to look at her with pity, but to be like, "Oh, she looked awful."
You
But she
remembered
did.
all of that.
She
Yeah.
looked terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely not herself and not exactly what she would want.
Yeah.
That same boss that was amazing to me came to her wake and was like, "So I'll see you at work tomorrow." And I was like, "I can't come to work tomorrow. I have like my nieces to take care of and figure some things out." So the dynamic between my boss and I definitely changed after that because I was home then the next day. And then I went back to work. I think that was her service was on a Monday. I stayed home on Tuesday and then Wednesday went back to work, which I was an absolute mess for.
You're a beast, Lori. Going back to work that fast. I know I went back pretty quick too. And I remember my boss saying, which I've shared on the show, was like, get out of here. She lost her brother. And so she connected, thank goodness. But I didn't know that prior. But I want to ask you something about this. And then obviously continue down our journey here, but do you feel like when we lose a loved one, which here we talk about sibling loss, of course, to an anticipatory loss, like your sister, you lost your sister to breast cancer, and then of course it spread, very, very intense situation. Do you feel like with work, there's so many questions with work, right? The FMLA, like the fact that they don't recognize siblings, it's so crazy to me. It's wild to me. But do you feel with an anticipatory loss, like your boss's reaction is so interesting to me because it's almost like they're like, okay, well, she's passed now, so you're going to be fine now. So like I feel like there's a different standard a little bit compared to like a sudden loss where they're expecting you to feel like this is a shock, you need to, whereas this isn't shocking that she passed, but there are things that set in after the passing. So no, you're not ready to resume life as usual because life is never going to be as usual again. Do you feel like there's a little bit of a different standard? Because I've seen it myself, and it's interesting that you have this to share with your boss because there was a shift there.
100%. I don't know that it's just with like workplaces or whatever. I think that, we knew she was sick. We knew she was going to die. And now it's happened. And she's like, great, I helped you out when you needed it so you could spend time with her. And now I need you to get back to work. But I also think that our society isn't great with grief support because somebody dies and they're really present for the first 12 weeks. And then they think you should be over it because they're over it.
Mhm.
And I'm not over it and it's almost 16 years later. So I get that life goes on and we have to adjust and pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and move on. But I don't think our society, not necessarily values, I just think they're like, okay, we're done here. Let's keep it moving. And that ties into when I said people saying the wrong thing. I do think there is something to be said for our society slash culture not being comfortable with silence, always needing to fill it with words and potentially the wrong things. There, I could probably list off 15 things that I don't ever want to hear out of someone's mouth again, starting with, I know what you're going through. And I know that we talked about this before we hopped on here, but we both know grief and we've both lost siblings, but your journey is very different than mine. And I think that goes for anybody that is experiencing loss. So the doctor who told me it was for the best, or just give this some time. If anyone takes anything away from what I'm saying today, is time just allows you to adapt to your new reality. That's what time does. It doesn't change how much you love the person. It doesn't change how much you miss them. I have found ways to incorporate her into my daily life with my daughter. And at holidays, we do some funny things. She wasn't a great cook. And I think it was maybe Christmas. She said she was bringing a salad. And my brother must have said that sometimes he likes salad like the day later because it's a little bit mushier. So she made this salad the night before. She shows up to Christmas with this ratty, wilted day old salad. And so sometimes at holidays, one of us will show up with this ratty 1 day old salad and be like,
I love it. Oh my
Gina made the
God.
salad. Here you go.
Mhm.
And then we just laugh about it. But it's one of my favorite stories.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you shared that. I love that Gina's here with
Gina's
us,
here.
guys.
She made the salad. Yeah, and it's terrible. It looks
It's so
awful.
cute.
The croutons are all mushy and but yeah, so we do that. But I do think that our society is so uncomfortable with silence that they
Yep.
just start saying things and it doesn't make anybody feel better. And I feel like I have been made angry so many times by things people say. And for me, like I will say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I have no words. If you need anything, please reach out. But then I'll usually reach out like a week later and be like, just checking in. Do you need anything? If you want to yell, scream, holler, or just talk about anything, please know that I am available to you. And maybe that should be the takeaway. If anyone takes anything away from that, if you don't understand grief or you've never had the privilege for someone who is grieving to allow you into their grief, that just be quiet.
I
You don't
agree.
have to fill the air and the space with unnecessary words because you're probably hurting someone's feelings.
Yeah, I agree. And I really, yeah, whenever we talk about this on the show, like what people say, I always think back, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing right now too, thinking back on all the crazy things that people told you, right? It's really wild. Yeah.
I honestly, the most the most common ones are, I know how you're feeling, she's better off, this is the way it was supposed to be. I get
Mhm.
it. I am a woman of faith, but if this was the way I thought it was supposed to be, it wouldn't be like this. I wouldn't be on your show, right? Because
Right.
my sister would be alive. But that's not my story. And while I get that, and stop telling people that, just give it some more time. Time just allows you to adjust to your new reality, which has them
I
not been.
love that you said that, Lori. Okay, time allows you to adjust to your new reality because I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but my tag phrase for time is I always say, time doesn't heal all wounds, guys. I always say that. I'm like, time doesn't heal all wounds, but time allows you to heal. And so we're saying something very
Yes,
similar, just
I
in a
love
different
that.
way. I got chills when you said your version of it because I love that. I love that you're saying like time allows you to like adjust. It's just a more elevated way to say what I say because the thing is, people say all the time, they're like, it doesn't get easier, it doesn't get easier. I'm like, look, it does and it doesn't. You're always going to feel this intense pain of missing your sister, Gina. That doesn't get easier and that doesn't change. But what we're saying is, with time and with how you spend your time too is a whole other thing. Just letting time
Right.
pass is not enough.
Sure.
But whatever you want to do for your journey and however you want to help yourself on the journey, you have, like you said, it allows you to, I love this, allows you to adjust. And that's why it becomes quote unquote easier. Like you're not going to be overwhelmed every single day of your life. But as you shared earlier on the show, there's always going to be parts of the story that are difficult to share or tap into or remember. Like that's where it becomes more balanced and we become a little more humanized along the journey versus feeling so like, how am I even going to get out of bed? Right. And that's where it starts to level for you.
For sure. And the other piece is, I am almost 16 years into my journey from her death, not counting the anticipatory piece of this. And there are days that I could tell you a million funny stories about her and laugh and laugh and laugh and probably laugh till I cry. And then there are days that you could pull an old picture out of her and I will sob. It just depends, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who can relate to that as well. It just depends. Or I'm in the grocery store and her favorite song comes on because we're that old, but like that kind of stuff. Or there's days that I'll dance in the grocery store.
Mhm.
It just depends what's going on.
Yeah, I connect with that too. For me, it's whenever I hear Goo Goo Dolls, because my brother was like a little kid, like dancing to that. So whenever I hear that, it's so funny you say that because because that plays on the grocery store these days, guys.
Right.
Okay, I'm old
Yes.
enough now. I'm almost 40 now. So, but when that plays, it's like, yeah, it can be maybe I'll tear up a little bit, or maybe I'll like sing it while I'm going down the aisle. It changes, it evolves your grief, and like different days it can hit you in different ways. And I think it's so nice that you're sharing that, Lori, with 16 years of the loss, not even the anticipatory part. I think it's just, again, I think it gives people permission to, you grieve for life, but it doesn't mean it's going to be debilitating for life.
For sure. So my sister loved REO Speedwagon and Journey.
I
And
love
so
it.
anytime like those will come on the radio, my daughter will be like, oh, Auntie Gina's here. Be quiet. So we have to listen to the whole song, which is just fun.
I love that. Let me ask you this. How have her kids done all these years? They're adults now, right? So it's like, yeah, some are older than there was an age gap in the kids. So how have they done? What was this like? I'm sure you've been very present and or maybe that was a whole
Sure.
dynamic as well because
So
that's
her
difficult.
her twins will be 29 this year. They're both married. They both have children. They have struggled with lots of things, but I think that they're both doing fairly well. They're not bust outs, but they're not CEOs of companies either. I think that they're both good moms. They have struggles, right? They lost their mom at 14, which I think is a really impactful age.
Yes.
But I think that they're both doing as best as like I would expect them to be doing. And then her youngest daughter just turned 18, just turned her birthday's November, but she'll be 19 in November. She's doing well too. School, work. Do I think that with Rachel is her youngest. I think Rachel, I don't want to say she struggled the most, but she's the one who didn't know my sister well.
Yes,
Brianna and
totally different.
Julia, her older ones, had her for 14 years and knew how much she loved them. So I feel like I would take Rachel a lot. And I remember one day she and I were going to the store and I said something about August 29th. And she was like, "What's August 29th?" And I'm like, "That was your mom's birthday." So I have tried to spend a lot of time with them over the years, and maybe more so Rachel a little bit, to be like, look at all these pictures that I have of your mom, and like, let's talk about her. What do you want to know about her? Like, she absolutely hated strawberries and tuna fish, but she absolutely loved Pepsi and Doritos, and just so that she knows a little bit more about her. And we've had our ups and downs where it's, how are you not helping us, or we could use more help, and that's everyone's perception, right? Their perception is their reality, and I've talked that through with them, and some of it is just as simple as, you were grieving your mom, I'm grieving my sister, and we're doing our best to help you and figure out how to align you with what your future kind of looks like.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. I know that can always be difficult, but I like to ask those questions because, again, it comes up so much in our community. And how do we keep our sibling alive to their children, to our children that we have that may never have met them, right? There's so many questions and things that come up. And I think just some really cool examples that you've given, like your mom loved this was her birthday. Like, it doesn't have to be super complicated, right? It can be,
Right.
I think what you've described is what I see people doing in a successful way to keep, memories alive and keep this person alive, in the sense of, and remembered, I guess I should say. It's the small things, like who is she as a person? Like, what did she like? What didn't she like? What were her special days? What were her special things? And I think it's really healthy to weave this into our life. When I've had my own, some of my own family members weave, like my brother, very in a very healthy way into their life with their kids and stuff. And I watch it and I'm like, that's the way to do it, right? But I think every family dynamic is different, so I'm always curious, like, how did you guys do this and what does that look like for you? But that's wonderful to hear that they're all doing well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's so tricky, right? Because I'm not their mom.
Hmm.
And there have been times that I've walked into family parties, and I don't think that Gina and I looked much alike growing up. You have some pictures, but I'll walk into a party and they'll be like, "You look just like my mom today." And I'm always like, I don't know if you want me to say sorry, or if it makes you sad, or if it makes you happy that I look like her today, or I reminded you of that. And mostly they say it doesn't bother them, but I'm always like, okay. So
Right.
it makes me uncomfortable sometimes.
Right. You're like, which way am I receiving this? Is this
Yep,
hard to
I
see
know.
me because of that? Or are you
Yes,
like, is it a good memory? I totally get where you're
right.
coming from that. Yeah. And again, there's all these dynamics in this. So, Lori, tell me a little bit about where you are today. Because again, 16 years, and then really 18, 19, if you go through her diagnosis,
Mhm.
you're coming up on a almost 20-year milestone. It's a big deal. But you are definitely an advocate for your sister, and I
Thank you.
again, I love you are, and I love that, your story and how you shared about advocating for her and that kind of that moment where it shifted. But where are you today? And then to tack on a second part of this, what advice would you give our incredible listeners, because some of them are going through this experience right now, Lori. Some of them have a sibling that is actively dying. Some of them may have a sister who has breast cancer that are listening to this, right? So again, I think these stories are so important to share, and not only to keep our beautiful siblings alive like Gina, but so that it's a roadmap for us and how we can get through this, right? Because sometimes we need a story more than anything else to get through something.
Oh, absolutely. So I've had lots of time to reflect, obviously, over the last several years. And then I spent a lot of time reflecting over the last week before our call here today. I will say that I always try to look for the positive when it comes to grief. And I think that people get confused by that. But I will tell you that I am a better human, I am a better nurse, and I'm a way better mom for this experience. And I will tell you that as a nurse, clinically very skilled, compassionate. I think that I did a really great job. But once Gina got sick and then was dying, I became a way better patient advocate. I will never let a patient go to the operating room or anywhere else without the family seeing them. Because if there's a chance that they could die in the operating room or potential for something bad to happen that they might not have an opportunity to see them, I will always advocate for that. I have to say that I'm a way better nurse. As a mom, I try to emulate some of Gina's the way she was raising Brianna, Julia, and Rachel. And just she was fierce. Like I can't even explain to you just how larger than life she was and passionate about everything and most passionate about her kids. But she had this soft side for them that I work hard every single day to show up like that for my daughter. And just as a human, I think I've always been kind, but after that experience or continuing my journey with this grief experience, I think I'm a way better human, just kinder. I will smile at people all the time because you have no idea what anyone else is going through. And maybe saying that you like their shoes or just smiling at them just changes their whole entire day.
That's so interesting you say that because it took me a few years because I was not pleasant in the first few years. I was very angry.
Nor was I.
Yeah. I'm like, I feel like I know where we're both going with this, Lori, but
Yep.
yeah. And then there was a shift in me, especially after starting the show, right? And also after getting answers about what happened to my brother, there was a shift in me because I started to realize I had to live in honor of him and in honor of both of us. And like, I had this, it was a shift for me, which I talk about very often. But as I started to do this show and I told my story and now I share all of your stories, I noticed a deep level of empathy and lighterness in myself and all of these things that you're describing. And I'm just like, I'm connecting so much with this part of your story. But people were like, how? This is so wild. Like, would you really find that you're a deeper empath? And I'm like, absolutely 100%, to the point where I have to
Yeah.
protect myself a little bit at this point because
You
it does
do.
change you.
It
Yeah.
does. You have to protect your energy. I could spend my whole life being miserable because I lost my sister, or I can try to find joy in being a better person, a better mom, and just spreading some of this. Right, we have an opportunity to choose joy, right? So I'm going to choose joy because if we've learned anything, life is precious and extremely short. So I that's how I choose. That's what I choose. A couple years in, terrible choices, pushing away amazingly good people for me because of grief, anger, fear, all of those things. That's not how I want to live my life. That's not how I want my legacy to be, and I certainly don't want to have that be how my sister's legacy is translated through me, that I'm an angry lady because I lost my sister. I'm super sad that I lost her. I'm forever grateful for her presence in my life. But to be angry all the time and mad, it's just not how I want to live.
Yeah. So well said. Lori, this has been amazing. Is there anything you want to add or anything I didn't ask you before we talk about where people can connect with you if you're comfortable with that, of course?
Sure. I don't think so. Is there anything that I missed that you think
Nope. Nope.
I should touch on or
Nope. Just always like to ask. And any last pieces of advice, anybody that's actively going through this, you gave some great nuggets all throughout here, but anything else that you would add that we didn't touch on? Somebody who maybe just recently lost their sister to breast cancer or is actively losing them, any little tidbit we might not have touched on, would love to hear that from you. And then we'll talk about where to find you.
so there are a couple things. First of all, show yourself some grace. There are some days that I barely could show up. The days that you can't get out of bed, show yourself some grace. And then also show others grace. Everyone, we can't all be having the best days of our life every single day. So also meet people where they're at. And if you're not feeling it, like you're supposed to go do something, but you're sad and you don't want to go, don't go. Do what's best for you. The people pleasing piece of grief I struggle with, and I know I don't want to spend too much time on this, but do what's best for you in the moment. I think that is important, because I feel like, oh, I have to go do this because so and so wants this, or I think it's the right thing to do, but I'm not feeling it today. Take care of you.
I love that. I think it's really great advice. And I wish I'd had that advice many, many years ago. So that's very
Me too.
valid.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Because I feel like there's a people pleaser in me. And I get it, Lori. That's great advice. You have to put yourself first. Look, just because you didn't want to go out to dinner that night or go to a party, or, you know what, there'll be more dinners, there'll be more parties, that take care of yourself. I love that. I think it's great. Lori, where can we connect with you? Where are you comfortable? Social media, email, what's best for you?
You know what? I think my email would probably be
Sure.
easiest, except for I have a long last name.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll put it in the show notes, but if you want to spell it out for us too, so they know
Sure.
where to find you. Mhm.
Sure. It's LCHIAPPETTA122 @gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. Lori, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and Gina's story with us. It's been really wonderful having you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be able to do this today.
Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.